Souvenirs and artifacts made of human skin and bones are permitted. He was nicknamed the Ghoul in Plainfield. His mother raised him on the theory of the innate immorality of the world. He decorated his columns with skulls. He was born in Crosse, Wisconsin, USA. On August 27, 1966, Edward Theodore Gein was born, the second son of Mr. George Philip Dean and Mrs. Augusta Wilhelm Mame. Mrs. Augusta hated her husband for his alcoholism. Because of this, she never found a job. However, he held various jobs, working as a carpenter, a tanner, and an insurance agent. He eventually managed to secure a share in a shop for several years, but then sold his share. She left Crosse County to live on a small farm called Plainfield. She would not allow the children to leave the farm unless Edward was going to school, and she imposed a strict isolation on the boys. Edward spent most of his time studying or working on the farm. Mrs. August raised the boys on the theory of the innate immorality of the world and the evil of alcohol, believing that all women were depraved except for her. She devoted time each afternoon to reading to them about death, murder, and divine retribution. Despite her mother's strangeness and strictness in confronting her upbringing, Edward was deeply attached to her and loved her beyond measure. Edward Dein was shy and told himself and his teachers that, for some reason, he was remembered for his strange traits. One of Edward's greatest childhood struggles was being punished by his mother whenever he made a new friend. Despite his poor social start, he did well in school and reading. His father died in 1940 of heart failure due to alcoholism. Edward began working with his brother in the small town and in the city to combat poverty. They accepted whatever work they wanted, sometimes working piecework or day labor. Edward frequently provides healthcare to neighbors and particularly enjoys babysitting. His older brother, Henry, tried several times to sever the bond between Edward and his mother. Henry considered this bond to be an obstacle to his brother's lifestyle. Henry tried every possible means, even resorting to trying to achieve the front goal, but to no avail. Henry began dating a divorced woman with 2 children, and he was considering leaving town to live with her in another city. Before leaving town, while he and his brother were engaged in a contracted job, they were burning the marsh vegetation of a local landowner. During the work, the fire grew out of control, attracting the attention of the fire department. By the end of the day, the fire was extinguished, but Edward discovered his brother had disappeared. Police found Henry's body at the scene of the fire with no burns, and the cause of death was a heart attack. Several witnesses reported bruises on his head, but the police ignored their testimony and ultimately determined that Henry died of asphyxiation. Shortly after Henry's death, his mother suffered a stroke that left her paralyzed. One day, Mrs. Augusta saw their neighbor, Mr. Smith, beating a dog. A strange woman emerged from Smith's house and shouted at him to stop beating the dog, but he continued beating it until he killed it. Edward stated that his mother was deeply upset by this scene, but that her distress was not due to the dog, but rather to the presence of the strange woman, whom she described as a fallen prostitute. Mrs. Augusta suffered a second stroke shortly afterward, and her health deteriorated rapidly, dying on December 29, 1945. Edward felt that his life had been shattered by the loss of his mother, his only friend and true love, and he was completely alone in the world. Edward lived alone in the family home, earning money from temporary jobs. He left all the rooms his mother used upstairs, as well as the downstairs parlor and living room, untouched. He used the rest of the house, which had become noticeably filthy. As the situation worsened, Edward was forced to live in a small room next to the kitchen. During this period, he became interested in reading fantasy stories and strange adventures, especially those about cannibals. Edward Dein was a skilled worker, and he applied for agricultural support from the federal government starting in 1951. He sometimes worked with the local road crew and threshing crews in the area. Between 1946 and 1956, He sold an 80-acre tract of land owned by his brother Henry. On the morning of November 16, 1957, Mrs. Bernice Worden, owner of a hardware store in Plainfield, disappeared. A resident reported that the store's truck drove out the back door of the building around 9:30 a.m. On that day, there were noticeably few visitors to the store, which some believe was due to the start of deer hunting season in the town. Mrs. Bernice's son, Frank Worden, a Plainfield deputy sheriff, came to the store at 5 and discovered the cash register open and blood stains on the floor. Frank Worden told investigators that he had been with his mother at the store that evening and that Edward had been at the store and had ordered a gallon of antifreeze, saying he would come by in the morning to pick it up. An examination of the receipts revealed that the last receipt from the machine was for a gallon of antifreeze. The police immediately went to Edward's house, but they arrested him in a grocery store, and the police searched his house and farm. Police discovered the headless body of Bernice Worden hanging upside down in a shed on Edward's farm. Her feet had been tied to the ends of a wooden beam and her wrists bound with ropes. An autopsy revealed that she had been shot with a .22 caliber rifle and that her body had been mutilated after her death. Upon searching the house, authorities found complete human bones and crushed bones, a wastebasket made of human skin, several chairs covered in human skin, skulls on his bedposts, female skulls, some with severed tops, deep plates made of human skulls, a corset made from a female torso from the shoulders to the waist, tight trousers made from the skin of a human leg, masks made from the skin of female heads, a sash made from the skin of a woman named Mary Hogan in a paper bag. The skull of Mrs. Mary Hogan in a box, the entire head of Bernice Worden in a cloth bag, the heart of Bernice Worden in a plastic bag, a little girl's dress, 4 noses, a pair of lips on a window shade mat, a lampshade made from the skin of a human face, and women's fingernails. These items were photographed in the state crime lab and then disposed of properly. When questioned, Edward told investigators that between 1947 and 1952, he had made 40 visits to 3 cemeteries in the country to exhume bodies, and that he felt each time he was in a state of stupor, as if he were controlled and not fully conscious. He reported that he sometimes awoke from this state, left the cemetery, and went home. On other occasions, he dug up the grave of recently buried middle-aged women whom he believed resembled his mother. He took the bodies home, skinned them, and tanned them to create a gory and perverted piece of art. Edorp admitted that he had fashioned a full-body sash from the women's skins in an attempt to emulate his mother. During his interrogation at the crime lab, Edorp admitted to shooting Mary Hogan, a bar owner who had been missing since 1954. Her head was found in his home, but he later stated that he did not remember the details of his murder. During the interrogation, a 16-year-old boy testified that his parents were friends of Edorp and would watch football games and movies with him. This young man reported that Edorp had a mummified head in his home, claiming it was an artifact from the Philippines brought by his cousin when he returned from serving in the Philippine Islands. The head was identified as being made from the skin of a human head. It was carefully peeled and used by Edorp to make a mask. Edorp was considered a suspect in several other unsolved cases in Wisconsin. This included the 1953 disappearance of Evelyn Hartley, a La Crosse County babysitter. During interrogation, Chief Archie reportedly assaulted Edorp by slamming his head and face against a wall in anger at his actions. As a result, Edorp's confession was deemed inadmissible and made under duress. Arcade died suddenly of a heart attack at the age of 43 before Edorp's trial. Many who knew Schley said he was traumatized by the horror of Edorp's crimes. This was compounded by his intense anxiety about being questioned about the assault on Edorp. One of Schley's colleagues described his death as another victim of Edorp's, claiming that Edorp had stabbed him without touching him on November 21, 1957. Edorp appeared in court on charges of first-degree murder. He pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity, claiming he was schizophrenic and mentally unfit to stand trial. He was subsequently sent to the Central Hospital for the Criminally Insane, now called the Dodge Maximum Security correctional institution. He was later transferred to the State Hospital of Minnesota. Edorp remained at the facility until 1968. That was when doctors determined he was mentally competent to consult with an attorney and participate in his own defense. The trial resumed on November 7, 1968, and lasted a week. A psychiatrist testified during the trial that Edorp had told him he was uncertain whether he had intentionally or unintentionally killed Mrs. Bernice Worden. Edward told him that while he was examining a gun from the collection for sale at Bernice's memorial, a bullet accidentally discharged and killed her. He did not recall aiming at her or any other events that occurred that morning. At the defense's request, Edward's trial was held without a jury, with Judge Robert Esch Golmer presiding. Golmer found Edward guilty on November 14, 1968. However, at a later hearing, after deliberations, Judge Robert Golmer returned a finding of not guilty by reason of insanity and ordered him returned to the Mendota State Mental Asylum and committed there. Edward spent the rest of his life in the Mendota State Mental Asylum until his death there in 1984 from respiratory failure due to lung cancer at the age of 77. Over the years, souvenir hunters chipped off pieces of his gravestone in Plainfield Cemetery until the stone itself was stolen in 2000. The stone was found in June 2001 near Seattle and stored at the county sheriff's department. The grave itself is currently unmarked, but it is known that Edward was buried in a grave located between his parents and his brother Henry's.